People who have pretended to fall asleep. What is something interesting you've overheard? Story 1. I remember way back I couldn't sleep on Christmas Eve. Being a little kid and all. So during this sleepless night where I guess my parents thought I was asleep, I heard my dad say, "Where do you think we should hide the new puppy?" This was pretty much at the top of my list, so naturally I was excited that I was getting a puppy. He talked for a good 20 minutes about the puppy, saying things like, "How should we keep it from barking before he finds him?" Before I dozed off. Next morning I discovered that my parents knew I was awake and just decided to mess with me. There was no goddamn puppy. I got a Game Boy though, so it wasn't too bad. Story 2. When I was 6 or 7, I remember staying up late without the babysitter realizing whilst my parents were out. I remember when they came back home I was so worried about getting into trouble for still being awake that I pretended to be asleep. Mom came into the room, asking whether or not I was awake. I stayed quiet, then she sat down on my bed. She was quiet for what felt like forever, but was probably only a couple of minutes before she bent over, stroked my hair, and kissed the top of my head whilst telling me how much she loved me and how much I meant to her. And then she took the covers around me tighter and left. To this day, it's my favorite memory of her, and one I've never shared with anyone. Her birthday's coming up in a month, so I'm going to figure out how to word it in a card. Story 3. Weekend retreat at church camp. My buddy and another friend's girl and I ended up in a room with 2 bunk beds. We were chilling when I realized that I was the third wheel, so I powered down. First, there were tests to see if I was awake. Then she climbed to his top bunk, then kissing. Then her moaning, then her telling him he should wash his hand. He got bored and did some fake sleep talking. They laughed and continued, but they called it a night without rounding home. She left, and I figured it was best not to give high fives till the next day. I don't know why I waited until we were at his house. Maybe she rode back with us. Still, it was my first time playing Super Nintendo. And as he handed me the controller that would introduce me to Yoshi, I asked him, "You did wash your hands, right?" He was so thrilled to get to talk to someone about it. But did he wash his hands? These are the important questions, people. Story 4. When I was about 13 or 14, not that long ago, I overheard my parents talk about my dog, Chowder. I was in the living room half passed out from exhaustion while they were in the dining area. Chowder was in the vet for a couple of days because of something called distemper. I just thought that after a few days, he'd get better and go back home and be the normal dog he would be. I was wrong. I lay motionless on the sofa because I was too lazy to get up. I accidentally heard Mom crying. I heard words like, "What will we tell her?" And, "She can't know this before her exams. She might not do well." By this time, I got really curious, so I tried my best to stay awake while staying in the uncomfortable position that I was in. A few other medical terms passed and I heard the word euthanize. I knew what that meant, and it took me a few seconds to put the pieces together. I cried the whole night and they found out in the morning. So there, not really interesting, just heartbreaking. Story 5. One night during high school, my friend and I got invited to a party. I didn't drive back then, so my friend picked me up. All went well on our way to the party. On the way back, however, he got pulled over. As we were pulling to the side of the road, I told him that I was going to pretend to be sleeping, since I was the passenger. Anyway, I hear the cop get out of his cop car, walk toward our car, stop at the window but doesn't say anything. I can feel the brightness of his flashlight, but I don't hear him or my friend say anything. After about what seemed like an eternity, I decided to open my eyes to see what's going on. That's when I see my friend, the guy who's driving, is pretending like he's sleeping too. After my initial internal holy moment, the cop, who was obviously messing with us, apologized for waking us up and asked us to step out of the car. He never said, but I'm sure he suspected us of being under the influence, which we weren't. My friend and I were just being dumb kids. Him more so than me, obviously. We fully cooperated, and since we weren't out past curfew, we were soon on our way. The reason the cops pulled us over? My friend's car had a busted taillight. I asked him what he hoped to accomplish by pretending to be sleep driving, to which he replied that he thought I had a smart idea and he should do what I did. 10 points for creativity. I'm sure if they kept sleeping, the cop would have believed it. Story 6. I was less than 3 feet away as one of my best friends took a 19-year-old's V-card. We traveled from the Bay to LA to attend a rave with some girls we met at EDC a few months prior. After all the partying took place, one buddy took the older sister to his car, and my other buddy started making moves in the younger sister. I was quote-unquote sleeping on the floor and was petrified because I felt like if I moved it would kill his game. So I sat through the most awkward experience of my life to help him get laid. It was short and sporadic, but they both seemed to enjoy it, so I think I made the right decision pretending to be asleep on the floor as they bunny in the bed literally 2.5 feet from me.
Hey, also, if you didn't know yet, me and a couple of my friends just launched Rufus Rugs. Premium, custom hand-tufted rugs. Maybe you're just a fan of Naruto and want to show it off. Or maybe you just love Pokemon and want buzz toys on display for everyone. Either way, we can make almost anything, so hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 7. I didn't necessarily overhear anything, but I pretended to fall asleep when I was about 12, because I heard someone coming into the room that my younger sister and I shared and thought it was my mom who would yell at me for being on my iPod at 2 a.m. Turns out it was a robber with a crowbar He just peeked into the room and went out when he saw us there. Really glad I didn't realize until the next morning who it was. I have no idea how I would have reacted if I'd realized some strange man was in my room at 2 a.m. Story 8. When I was in high school, I was practically a loner. Before high school, I lived in Central Florida and didn't understand friendships and romantic relationships because of constant middle school bullies lying and messing with me and stuff. Anyways, I moved from a big city in Central Florida to a small town in Redwoods, California. I moved when I was in 8th grade, and I just kept to myself knowing that I'll probably move again because of my dad's job, so I thought there was no point in making friends. I was always keeping to myself and minding my own business, and I had a lot of sad thoughts, and I thought that if someone learned of my sad feelings, then they would make fun of me, so I had to act like I'm not sad. Since I wasn't good at socializing, I realized one of the easiest ways to be in a good mood was to hold my classroom's door open. I knew it was a nice gesture, so I just did it. And I thought being nice meant being in a good mood, so I held the door open every time. So every morning, I would always hold my first period door open. I literally just stood there and held the door open, sometimes sitting but mostly stood there. You get the occasional thank you, and I would just nod my head and not say anything. After a while in my head, I would say, "It's working. No one will know that I'm feeling sad." So to make it more that I'm not sad and make it look like I'm happy by doing more nice gestures, I started picking up trash if someone littered and threw it away. I picked up a pencil when someone dropped it. If someone was sitting alone, I would sit next to them, although I wouldn't say much. And I would say, "Good morning, name," to everyone in my first period. In my mind, it was foolproof. No one will know I'm sad, and oddly enough, I didn't get bullied. Fast forward to high school. Well, surprise, surprise, there were bullies. I was made fun of because I was Asian and my bus rides home. I was being pushed around in the hallways, etc. However, I kept on doing my gestures because, I do not want people to know I'm sad. Even though I did break down crying once on my bus, another fast forward to sophomore year. Every morning, I would always hold open the door to my high school zero period, which was really early in the morning, and I would almost always be the first one there. I was sitting there with my eyes closed to rest a bit, and I overheard some kid was making fun of me and stuff. Typical. Then I overheard someone defending me, saying I'm a nice kid and stuff, but it wasn't just one person but multiple people. They were talking about how dedicated I am to being nice to people, holding the door open, picking up trash, picking up dropped pencils, sitting next to the lonely kids, etc. Soon after, I started noticing people's kindness towards me. One moment was when this one bully held me to the ground when there was no one around. He was telling me to put up a fight and saying, "Show me how Asian people fight." Of course, knowing about expulsion, I refused to fight and let him have his way. Then out of nowhere, two gangster-looking kids shoved the bully off of me and told the bully off, and not to mess with me. They were telling me how they got my back and stuff. To myself, I thought that was odd. Soon, the days after, I started noticing practically every clique was defending me. On my bus ride, a couple of country kids were telling their country friend to apologize to me for always making fun of me for being Asian. Some goth-looking kids were wondering if I was alright, that I should smile some more since I had a great smile. I even realized that it was a bunch of football players that one morning when I was pretending to be asleep that defended me. Not long after, I started smiling more, saying hello to everyone I knew the name of in the hallway, which was a lot, apparently, and joined a community involving clubs. Heck, I was even nominated for the sophomore class homecoming king. I ended up telling people not to because I wasn't good in front of crowds. I ended up moving like expected by the end of my sophomore year, but when I casually mentioned it in my English class, everyone stopped talking and looked in disbelief. Looking back, it was that moment that I realized for the first time that it truly mattered to people, and I haven't thought as much since. Almost feels like something out of an anime or movie. Great story, and it's definitely a fantastic reminder that a little bit of kindness goes a long way. Know what else goes a long way? Leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel. I appreciate it. Story 9. We're spending the night at a friend's house. I'm a guy. She's the girl who brought my friend over because we were out partying. We all slept in the same room. I was laying on the floor near my friend when I heard my friend Andrea call my name. Wanting to sleep, I ignored her, not moving, to which she responded, "Okay, Andy, I think he's asleep. Come here." But 5 minutes later, I heard the bed squeaking and her soft moans. One of them sneezed about 15 minutes into it, in which I responded, "Bless you." They immediately stopped. 10 out of 10 would do again. A real Chad would have thanked them and kept going, though. Story 10. I wasn't pretending. I had been asleep for about 30 minutes while my boyfriend and his buddy were smoking some. I'm not really sure what woke me up, but I kind of became conscious for a few moments but didn't really move or anything, so I was just trying to go back to sleep. Anyway, my boyfriend, who had been rubbing my back as I slept, turned to his buddy and said, "Hey man, you see this girl right here? I'm gonna marry her one day. She's gonna be my wife." His buddy just says, "Yeah dude, I know, and I'll be standing right there with you when it happens." It was so sweet and it was so hard to not just tear up or smile or anything. But when things are tough, I sure do think of that night. Story 11. Back in my freshman year at college, my roommate would go to the gym late at night and he would text me when he was heading back home. I'd try to hop in bed then because if we got to talking when he was back, we'd be up for hours. Once or twice a week this would happen where he would get back to a dark room with me looking like I was asleep, and in reality I was just laying down with my eyes shut, trying to get asleep. He would unpack his stuff and kind of talk to himself a bit, occasionally saying weird stuff about how peaceful I looked. He'd get in his bed and hop on his laptop and start browsing Reddit, and he'd usually be whispering, "Oh, what the f?" on and off for about half an hour before I'd get tired of it and make a loud chicken noise. Without fail, it would scare the heck out of him. He'd laugh and get off his computer and go to bed. I feel like some of you guys are forgetting we can just ask people if you could get some sleep, but I guess this works too. Much more wholesome this way. Story 12. I've been waiting to tell this story for a long time, but I made a throwaway to keep all the parties anonymous. So my very conservative family is big on taking family vacations. My parents never like to spend a lot of money though, so for 1 week during the summer, my sister and I found ourselves in a cheap 2-bedroom cottage far away from civilization. One year, my ultra-conservative parents allowed my sister to bring her boyfriend to the 2-bedroom cottage for a few days. My parents slept in one bedroom, and of course they demanded that I be a gentleman and let my sister sleep in the one remaining bedroom. Whatever. I'm pretty laid back, but the fold-out couch sagged something fierce, so when I centered myself in the bed, the sides were practically encompassing me. My conservative parents, of course, were not about to let my sister's boyfriend sleep in the bedroom with my sister. Oh no. He was fortunate enough to get a tiny old rusty cot which my parents set up right next to me by the fold-out couch. We had electricity, and we had running water, but that was about it. There was never that much of anything to do, but I enjoy reading so I didn't mind family vacations. One night, I was on the fold-out couch reading a particularly good book. It was around 1 a.m. when I finally turned off the lamp and decided to get some sleep. So I turned off the lamp, put my head down on the pillow, and then a few seconds later I hear the slider door open. Apparently my sister and her boyfriend were outside drinking by the campfire. They were both giggling as they came into the cottage, and by their failed attempts at whispering, I could tell that they were both at least a little drunk. Not my business. I didn't want to make things awkward for them, so I pretended to be asleep. I had my eyes closed and was keeping my breath even. A few seconds later I heard them kiss goodnight, and they went their separate ways. My sister went to the bedroom, my sister's boyfriend plopped in the cot right next to where I was pretending to be asleep. So not even a minute later, I'm half drifting off to sleep, and I start hearing noises in the direction of the cot. It sounded like very cautious. I was around 18 years old at this point. I've been around the block. I know how to recognize the telltale sounds of it when I hear them. So yeah, my now brother-in-law was on the cot right next to me, into images of my sister. Ew. So the cot was really freaking small. I'm pretty sure my sister's boyfriend's legs were dangling off the edge of the cot, but in any case, the entire cot would shift and squeak every couple of seconds that he was doing the dirty. I didn't want to make things awkward and interrupt the guy, so I made the ultimate bro sacrifice. I kept my breathing even and let the guy finish. Looking back, it was kind of funny because occasionally he would get carried away and realize that he had made too much noise. He would pause to listen and see if I'd woken up, but I kept my breathing sorta heavy and even throughout the ordeal, so he eventually would get confident and keep going. Towards the end, the cot was practically like hopping up and down, and then things finally grew silent. I knew he had finished, and sure enough, a few seconds later, he made the rookie mistake of accidentally letting go of his sweatpants, and I heard the classic thwop as they came back to his stomach. So yeah, I had a hard time looking my sister's boyfriend in the eye the next morning. Now he's my brother-in-law, and until now I have not told anyone this story. This better be some sort of wedding speech or toast someday. Story 13. 2 things. One good, one bad. First, the bad. Not heard, but one time when I pretended to be asleep, one of my brother's friends decided it was a good time to try to assault me. He and my brother were sitting on the floor in front of the couch while I was laying down with a blanket over me. He sneakily stretched his arm out and started running his hand up my thigh. I quote-unquote woke up when he stopped at one point, yawned, said something about drifting off to sleep during the movie and that I should go to bed, and got to my bedroom as fast as I could without looking weird. Second, early on in my relationship with my now husband, we were lying together post-spicy time and falling asleep. I drifted off but woke back up a few minutes later. He softly called my name and I decided to see what would happen if I didn't respond. He said something like, already asleep, then started talking about how much he loved me. He hoped we'd be together forever and how amazing I was. It was so hard to not smile and keep quote-unquote sleeping, but I was loving all that praise. Story 14. April Fool's Day at my buddy's house. We were in our early 20s, but my buddy still lived with his dad. He was the youngest of 3 sons, and his dad was getting up in there in age. He was an old-style, drinking and filtered Lucky Strike smoking, stealing old man. Well, his son did the old saran wrap the toilet prank. Waited till after the old man went to bed. Anyone who had ever stayed the night there had walked in on his dad's middle of the night dumps. The old coot never locked the door. You'd just wander in after a few beers and there's this shriveled old raisin of a man smoking in the toilet and letting loose some of the most airy and healthy sounding ever. So we're in the living room when we hear him go to take his midnight dump. We're watching TV, but as soon as we heard him moving, we all pretended to sleep. About a minute later, we hear a loud, what the f***, come from the bathroom. We're all trying our best not to laugh. A couple of minutes go by, and his dad pops his head around the corner, sees us sleeping, and just goes back to bed, calling us a bunch of limp. He wasn't in bed for more than 5 minutes before we were all in tears laughing. Later, he would describe the experience to us. He sat down and started to piss and felt his balls get warm. He thought it was weird and it didn't register with him for a minute. He finished his smoke, cleaned up, and just went back to bed. He knew we were up, but he also knew what day it was. Cheers to the old guy for not blowing up on them. Must have some mad respect for April Fools. Story 15. I was in this messed up relationship with my ex-husband when I was pregnant with my second kid. We had a roommate, female, but we would all do the deed with each other because we were young and free-spirited or something. Anyway, I pretended to be asleep one night because I didn't feel like doing it that night. I didn't want to turn anybody down or make up an excuse. My ex-husband and the roommate got to talking in the next room. The bedroom door was open so I could hear them pretty clearly, and she asked him why he married me anyway. His response? I just didn't know what else to do at that point. Seemed like the next logical step, and I took it. I honestly wish I hadn't done it, and I wish I was single right now living life. But now I have this family, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna get out. Hit me real hard. Story 16. When I was a kid, my mom would make my brother and me take naps for like 45 minutes. I pretended like I was sleeping, and I heard my mom talking on the phone to my grandma. During the conversation, I assume my grandma asked what my brother and I were up to, because she said, I'm Holly's brother is sleeping, and I'm Holly's pretending to be asleep. I was like, she said she knew I was faking because my mouth was closed. Whenever I'm actually asleep, my mouth is slightly open. Ever since that day, whenever I'm pretending to be asleep for whatever reason, I keep my mouth slightly open. Thanks for the tip, Mom. If you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sure you'd be interested in, what do you swear you saw but have no proof? You won't believe story 1. See you there.